In this video, we're looking at portions and percents. It goes along with the 6th grade CPM lesson for Chapter 3, Section 1, Lesson 2. Imagine that you have a jar of stars, such as this one, and you want to see how many stars you have a certain color. You could take the time to count out every single star, but if you're like me, I don't want to take that much time to do it. So what we can do is we can look at a portion, and a portion is a part of a whole. And if we count them out, we can see that 3 of the stars for every 10 that we count are red. Okay, so that's giving you a fraction. It's telling you the portion or the amount of a sample because we're only looking at a smaller amount of it again. Okay, there might be, say, 4 out of 10 that are green, and maybe the last 3 out of 10 are blue. Right? So we can describe the portion that we're looking at as a fraction. And then what we're able to do is we can convert that into a percent. So take 75% as an example. When we're looking at per, okay, what we're really saying is each. Or we can be saying out of to mean a part of it. Whereas cent, we're going to be referring to 100. Okay, so if we're saying 75%, we're saying 75 parts out of each 100, or 75 out of 100. And although we might not have 100, we're looking at that as a portion. So let's look at an example. We said earlier that 3 out of every 10 stars that we drew were red. So we can say 3/10 of the stars are red stars. And there are 2 ways that we can turn this into a percentage. We can say that we have our 3/10, and because it's parts out of 100, we know we want our denominator to be out of 100. And we can multiply this using a giant 1 if we can figure out how to get from 10 to 100. Well, I know in my head that I multiply 10 times 10 to get to 100, and because it's a giant 1, my numerator and denominator must be the same, so I have 10 over 10 inside the giant 1, and then just multiply straight across, and you have 30 out of 100. And again, we already said that 30, when we're looking at percent, per meaning each, or out of, and cent meaning 100, we know that from there that we can just take our numerator, and that becomes 30%. And what if it's a harder number to work with? Maybe it doesn't easily go into 100. What we can do is we can take our 3/10, where our fraction bar, and always in a fraction, the fraction bar means to divide. So what we're saying then is we're going to take our 3 and divide it by 10. And then as soon as we go through that, we know that 10 goes into 3 ones 0 times, but 10 goes into 30/10 3 times. And then we can separate it out and 0. And what we're going to do with our decimal, because we're looking at percent, is we're going to multiply that then. So we're going to take our 3/10 and multiply it by 100, which gives us 300/10, or 30, which again is 30%. So it's really important to remember that this fraction bar means to divide, and you're going to need to remember that going forward. Try this one on your own. Look at 5/8. It's not going to go into 100 really easily, so think about how you can use your fraction bar to work on that. Okay, the first thing that I did is I did 5 divided by 8 because we can just read it straight down, 5 divided by 8. Make sure you're putting the correct number underneath. And when we do that, we get 625 thousandths, which again, we can write it as 625 thousandths and then simplify it to 62.5 over 100 and get our percent that way. Or we can simply multiply it by 100, and when we do that, we're going to end up with 62.5%, which is the same as what we got up above. Now, something else that the lesson gets into that we'll use a little bit but not as much is a fraction bar. Fraction bar is essentially a number line, but you're using percents instead. So like when we had our 3/10 earlier, we said it was 30%. Okay, we're going to say 30% is about here. And it's not super precise, but it's in the ballpark. And then we also had our 5/8, which we said is 62.5%, which would be about here. And that's the big idea with the fraction bar. And we can do decimal percent with it. We can do the fraction. There are a lot of ways that we can write it. Just know the general idea is it's a number line and you're putting the number on there.